Time to bring in the MPs on today's developments. Joining me from Winnipeg, James Bezan, the Parliamentary Secretary for the Defence Minister in Toronto, John McKay, the Liberal member for Scarborough-Guildwood, and with me here in studio, Paul Dewar, the NDP member for Ottawa Centre. James, I want to start with you since this was a government announcement. Can you walk us through exactly what you're sending and where these military assets are going to be going?
So this morning, Prime Minister Harper announced that we're moving 6 CF-18s into Eastern or Central Europe at the request of NATO, along with support teams, as well as 20 officers will be going to NATO headquarters in Brussels at the Superior Headquarter Allied Powers Command to start doing some planning about the overall security within NATO region itself, and also to show that we're standing in support with the people of Ukraine.
Paul, is this the right move?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Yesterday, we had our NATO allies made their commitments, and they were actually wondering where Canada was. We're now doing it fine. What's most important about happened today is the actual negotiations and the fact that they seem to have come to an agreement to de-escalate. What we have to do now is frankly get people on the ground. Make sure that we have those observers in the Crimea and right across Ukraine, and hold Mr. Putin to account. There's one thing to negotiate, as we all know, but to make sure that those agreements are going to hold, we need to have different assets on the ground right now, and that means having personnel who are going to observe and to hold Mr. Putin to account to make sure that this agreement holds. So in some ways, this is yesterday's news, what was announced by the Prime Minister. Today's news is about this agreement and about holding Mr. Putin to account, and that means bringing in observers behind the OSCE.
John, obviously this is a pretty significant development for Canada. What's the Liberal Party's stance on it?
We support the government on this announcement. We are a part of NATO. We're supporters of NATO and Article 5 and the collective security. We're a little concerned about the military cutbacks, that it may limit the capacity to be as engaged as we would otherwise be. We do think that there are some wider implications that need to be addressed. This is Russia, after all, and it's a significant world power. It does have implications for things like Syria, for our relationships with Russia. It does have a kind of an ancient history of grievances where Russia feels threatened. Some might say it is not warranted, but nevertheless they do feel that way. So, you know, in terms of the general overall proposition, the approach, we agree. Our only final concern would be we should dial down the bombast a little bit. I think while we're negotiating, we don't need to have rhetoric which obviously has no impact on Mr. Putin, and if it doesn't have any impact on Mr. Putin, there doesn't seem to be much point to it.
James, I'm curious to know, is there a chance that the Canadian government is considering more beyond this? I mean, you have the six-pack, as they call it, fighter jets, you have those military planners. It looks an awful lot like the package that we sent before Libya.
Well, let's just say that we still have all our hopes tied into a diplomatic solution here. And as Paul alluded to earlier, there was some negotiations today in Geneva, and flowing from that is about not just holding President Putin to account, but to have him actually de-escalate the situation. So the pretext that's occurring right now in Donetsk Oblast, there's some concern that there could be some new moves happening in Luhansk as well, that we actually see what's happening there is what occurred in Crimea before the occupation and then the annexation by Russia. So Russia definitely has to step back. Russia has to quit interfering in their neighboring sovereign state of Ukraine, and this is their opportunity to do that. But that being said, we have a responsibility through our NATO relationship with our NATO allies to respect the concerns that have been raised there. And as said, we were involved yesterday in the state funeral for Mr. Flaherty, but until the earliest possible time that we can make the announcement we did today, that we are going to follow suit with all member states of NATO to enhance the security of the region.
It's going to be really important for the next couple of days to ensure that Canada does its part to make sure this agreement works and holds. And I think right now what we need to hear from the Conservatives, from the government, is what are we going to do to support this agreement to make sure it holds. I think one obvious thing, and I'm sure James would agree, is that we should be supporting the OSCE observers, making sure that we're going to get them there as soon as possible. Pre-election observers are going to be important because, as you know, there'll be elections coming up in May, and that was seen as a bit tenuous. Hopefully we can see them happen, and I think Canada can play a role by sending observers in there and working with our allies to do that.
John, you brought up the fact that you were concerned to some degree about cuts, and I have to ask you, when we're sending fighter jets, if this brings up not the F-35, because obviously that's a procurement, but the importance of Canada being able to project air power.
Well, fortunately, over the last number of years, both governments, both Liberal and Conservative governments, have done a significant refurbishing of the F-18 fleet. So in that respect, it's a good fleet and it's a capable fleet, but it is with every year that passes, it becomes less capable. And it's not as if you're flying over Libya, where the Americans, first of all, degraded the Libyan capabilities. You're dealing with a superpower, and they have their own capabilities, and they're not insignificant. And so there is a bit of a concern there that we may be able to initially project some force, but what's behind that? In that respect, as I say, we do support the government's actions thus far, but we do have a kind of a niggling concern that over the last number of years, with the cutbacks in the military, that our capability to project force has been somewhat reduced.
James, just a quick last question to you. I want to ask you about exactly what those jets are going to be doing, and if there's any relationship to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the American top general who was here yesterday talking to the CDS. Was this a product of that discussion?
No, this was a decision that was made actually on the overall situation in Ukraine in the NATO contacts, who NATO ambassadors had met just on Wednesday. So this was a result of those discussions. And as to location and where our 6 fighter jets are going to be located, that's still in negotiation, because yesterday all the nations committed assets, and now it's just a matter of where you place those assets around on the map. And once we have direction that way, and we determined where we're going, then the F-30 or the F-18s will be deployed.
Thank you very much to our MPs for joining us on this Thursday. Wishing all of you a great Easter weekend.
Thanks very much.
Same to you. Thank you.